Well, hello and welcome to another episode of In Conversation with Benedict Rogers, an interview series produced by Hong Kong Watch, broadcast on YouTube and our social media and our website. And this is the first episode of 2021. And of course, this new year has begun in a very shocking and dramatic way, both in Hong Kong and in other parts of the world as well. But I'm really delighted and privileged to welcome as our first guest for this year, Ted Hui, who will be well known to almost every viewer, I'm sure. Ted was a very prominent pro-democracy legislator, played an active part in the protests of 2019 and early 2020, resigned from the legislature along with the whole pro-democracy group, and of course then escaped from Hong Kong and is now in the UK. So Ted, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Ben. And I also thank you for all the efforts and all the kind words that you made in the past. I'm really grateful for that.
Oh, it's my pleasure and privilege. And I wish it wasn't necessary, but as it is, I'm very glad to do anything I can to help, and so is the whole Hong Kong Watch team. So, Ted, let me start by asking you. You had, as I just mentioned in the introduction, a rather dramatic departure from Hong Kong via Denmark and now to the UK.
Sure.
Could you tell us just a little bit about how you managed to escape from Hong Kong and why you decided to leave?
Yes, I flew to Scandinavian countries early in 2019 and made friends with the parliamentarians there, and then we kept contact and before the national security law and even after it. And so after the national security law it was enacted and enforced in Hong Kong, and I had thought about the possibility in the future that there might be the situation may go really bad to a point that no one is allowed to speak up for Hong Kong's freedoms, to a point that whether it's jail or it's your free speech and it's your choice. So I thought it came to that bad, the situation. So but that's not a confirmed decision yet at that time. That's about summer last year. Then I kept the conversation with the Danish parliamentarians, and then we discussed whether it's possible that we hold a climate change forum or meeting other parliamentarians and academics in Denmark. And that actually is part of my routine. I travel every year to different countries and talk to different parliamentarians and experts on that. So they immediately said yes and organized a meeting accordingly. But of course, on my part, I haven't made up my mind about going into an exile. But in their part, I didn't know beforehand, but they mean it as an escape opportunity for me and arranged everything more on top of the green topics discussions. And that's why, so the meeting took place in November, and then I flew to Denmark, and then I only knew after I landed Denmark that they changed the programs quite totally. And so I didn't have to talk about climate change and environmental policies anymore. And they wanted me to talk directly about human rights situations in Hong Kong and understanding that I would not be returning to Hong Kong and would start my exiles. So it's how it all happened, basically.
Thank you. And just more recently, we've heard reports that the Hong Kong authorities are essentially threatening the Danish politicians and activists who assisted you. Could you say a bit more about that, and what does that say about the the Hong Kong authorities' attitude?
Yes, I couldn't believe that the Chinese regime is really doing it. But what I understand is that it's just still bluffing and not really putting it into reality. Because when I talked to the respective parliamentarians and my Danish friends, they have not received any notifications, or they have no news about being issued against or which arrest warrants at all. And so the Hong Kong police has yet to confirm that the news. So I believe that the Chinese regime is only studying into the feasibility of it, but still, it's still very ridiculous for a formal, respected parliamentarians, MPs, treated like that, facing a possible arrest warrant, international one. And I think it is the attitude of Beijing and of the Hong Kong regime acting continuously as what the international community calls the wolf warriors in the diplomatic policies, and to a point that even it knows it will not succeed. The Danish Prime Minister and the Foreign Secretary already made it clear that it will never extradite any of its MPs to Hong Kong for the meetings that happened. So it's quite unbelievably ridiculous, but perhaps my speculation is that it might really happen. And if that happens, of course, I don't think my Danish friends will be in danger, but then it limits their future travels, possible travel to Hong Kong, China, and to all the countries which has an international treaty of extraditions with China. So it can be a possible danger for them. So I'm grateful for their efforts, and I'm astonished by the possible decisions made by the regime, big Chinese regime.
I guess it's a reminder to the world of the particularly ridiculous element of the national security law. I mean, there are many ridiculous elements of the national security law, but one particularly extraordinary and dangerous element is the extraterritorial clause of that law, which essentially means that anyone anywhere in the world could be in breach of Hong Kong's national security law. More difficult to actually implement, as you've described. The Danish politicians will probably not be in danger, but it does, as you say, raise questions about travel to places where China has more influence.
You're right, Ben. How the national security law is ridiculous in that it's not only the 4 Danish friends that are facing these troubles, but also anyone basically in the world. As I talked to quite many parliamentarians in the world and government officials and people like you, and the regime can always accuse not only me, but you, all of you, of collusions with me for subversions of countries, and for interfering and applying sanctions, for example. And these are all abating the breaching of the national security law, and so putting all people like you and parliamentarians in a potential danger. So because of its extraterritorial effects, very ridiculous ones.
Ted, could we look back a little bit at your political career in Hong Kong? You first went into politics, as I understand it, in 2011 as a district councillor, and then you were elected to the Legislative Council in 2016. Why did you decide to go into politics at that time? And did you ever foresee a time when you might end up having to resign from LegCo with the entire pro-democracy camp and also face arrest and then exile?
I could never foresee what's happening right now. It's totally beyond my imagination. And so I didn't aim to be a politician at all when I was younger, at my 20s. So even I started with a district councillor, it was because my colleagues, veterans, district councillor Yoon, had to retire at that time, and so he invited me to why not try a public office running as district councillor. And then at that time, I was a researcher for the Democratic Party, and I worked closely with people like Martin Lee, James Toll, Albert Ho, and then I said yes, I can have a try. And then I did, and I won a public office. And then I felt that being in a public office and representing the people is very fulfilling. And with that resources and the influence, I could really help Hong Kong's human right and freedom to go steps forward. And so, and that's with that in mind, I also participated a lot in civil society and fighting with people in the streets, and even with the umbrella movement, I was very much involved in that. And so it came to 2016, and situation that's after the umbrella movement, situation got worse, and I believe that it's time that I can take one step forward, and with more a bit more stronger stance towards Beijing. So I decided to run in the legislature in the elections, and I won. And but of course, even at that time, 2016, I couldn't imagine ever that I would quit from the legislature, and legislators on the Democratic camp, on the Democratic side, would be so assaulted as to disqualifying us all, and couldn't imagine that they would be placing so ridiculous criminal charges against us, and with an aim to throw us all to jail. And so things changed really rapidly and beyond anyone's imagination and expectation.
In 2019, you played a very significant part in the protests, the anti-extradition protests, including having the experience of being pepper sprayed at basically directly in your eyes. They even removed your goggles, and I've watched the footage myself, as I'm sure many have. Could you tell us a bit more about your experiences in the protests and your reflections on those events?
Yes, I did participated in a lot of frontline protests, and I considered myself responsible for to be in with the crowd, and because that's the time I felt most powerful of being a representative of the public. You know, our legislature is designed to be very much pro-Beijing. It's not a real democracy. It's only a half democracy. Only half of our seats is returned by one man, one vote elections. So I felt that whenever I had to speak inside the chamber, and every word that I was spoken was like endorsing the unjust system of the Hong Kong legislature. But with the streets, it's different. That I really felt I'm protecting my people, and in face of police brutality, and I felt responsible being there to point out, as I observed, any human rights violations, the misuse of force and abuse of violence on the police part with all the weapons. So I've been sprayed directly, you're right. I've been tear gassed very much and facing rubber bullets, threats of rubber bullets. And at the early stage of the movement, and the Hong Kong police and the regime at large were not that crazy. So I at the frontline protests, I could still communicate with some police officers. as to what their next move would be. But at the middle stage of the movement, they totally ignored me and didn't want to talk to me as a representative of the people. At the later stage, they gone so crazy that they point their weapons or guns at me and sprayed me and targeting me when they shoot their rounds. And also, whenever they saw me, they would be like words and verbally assaulting me. So I had a feeling that they've gone really, really crazy at that time. Then it's important, I felt, that I can be a peacemaker there. Even the police might not stop their violence, but it's important that I witness what's happened. And at some point later on, I brought actions against the police myself with private prosecutions because, and so in face of criminal charges against those protesters, I felt like they would feel that some more powerful people are on their side, and even I'm even prepared to testify in court of what observed. So these are the why I believe it's important for any MPs or legislators to be at the protest front, to be with the people, to continue the spirit, and also to point out human rights violations.
Well, that's very, very inspiring and very courageous. Since you left Hong Kong and came to the UK, we have seen some really awful news of arrests. We've seen Jimmy Lai jailed and charged under the national security law, the sentencing of 10 of the 12 Hong Kong youths in Shenzhen, and then, of course, most recently at the start of this new year, the arrest of 53 pro-democracy activists, including many of your former colleagues and friends, I'm sure. What are your reflections as you see these arrests and prison sentences, and what do you think those of us outside Hong Kong can do specifically to help individual political prisoners in Hong Kong?
Well, of course, when I'm here in the UK and reading the news about Hong Kong, it's always very sad and heavy. And seeing my comrades, my other freedom fighters being thrown to jail, it would have been me if I were in Hong Kong. So it reflects that the national security law is being used and being manipulated more and more, and to an extent that the regime is to silence or dissents everyone's, not only politicians and activists like before. Now they're targeting also journalists and even teachers. There are 2 teachers disqualified for supporting the movement or being involved in the movement. And also, it's now just recent news that the regime is using the national security law to totally ban the operation of one website, which is an archive of the wrongdoing of the police and the wrongdoings of the government. Now it's been banned, so flow of information would be very much restricted. I can foresee that. And then now the arrest of the 53 implies that all Democrats from all political spectrums, from the most radicals to the most moderate ones, are targeted now. And in the future, primary elections are not allowed, and speech and actions inside the chamber would be very much restricted. I believe that there will be a very dramatic change of the electoral systems upcoming in this year, and that would totally exclude all Democrats into running as a representative anymore. So that's what's happening in Hong Kong, yes.
It really is the complete dismantling of any final signs of democracy.
Yes, it is. And on the other hand, the national security law is also destroying the judicial independence and the rule of law. And you can see that the national security law allows the regimes to pick judges and decide who can hear political cases and who cannot. So it's direct interference to the operation of judiciary. But no judges in Hong Kong are saying anything, complaining about that. It's very sad. So I would say that the court is acting in cooperation somehow with the regimes. And if not, it's self-censoring, starting to be. And so the rule of law is very much eroded when you can see even I start my private prosecutions and judicial reviews against the government. Now it's blatantly intervened and my case is being withdrawn. So now civilians is very it's hard for them to get justice by legal means. So that's the impact of the national security law, really.
So we've seen that in a sense, they started with the protesters. They've moved on to legislators and pro-democracy activists, as you've described, of all kinds, from the most radical to the most moderate, and then the judiciary. What do you think their subsequent targets will be? Do we see? Can we expect any kind of press freedom to survive? How about academic freedom?
It's already happening. And of course, Jimmy Lai will be the symbol of press freedom in Hong Kong. Now he's gone personally, but his Apple Daily is still running. So I'm not optimistic as for how long it can still operate and be a formal a business in Hong Kong. And we are already seeing others media organizations being partly bought up and change of people, management people, and those people are very much Beijing's leaning and Beijing friendly elites. So in the future, I think all these organizations will be targeted, if not eliminated, but at least with the highest managerial level, people will be replaced totally, directly under the national security law or indirectly. And I can also foresee that internet freedom will be very much restricted. And there are already YouTubers, key opinion leaders, having so worried about their own safeties and their prospects of facing criminal charges, and they either stop operating or already fled to other countries, not returning back to Hong Kong. So we can expect things to go really worse than what we have now.
Of course, one other institution that the authorities have clearly influenced very significantly is the banking sector, and specifically HSBC. You've had your own very well publicized direct experience of not only your own bank account and credit cards, but also the bank accounts of your family members being frozen. Why do you think HSBC did that to you? And what do you think the international community's response to HSBC should be?
Yes, HSBC froze my own account, my family's account. And just about a week ago, my credit card's been canceled. It's not frozen, but totally canceled, as well as my family's credit cards. So it's a sign that HSBC is self-censoring, that should pressure from the Hong Kong regimes. and that it had to act accordingly, and it has to act as an ally of the regimes and be part of the game and to be part of the human rights violations. So, or by oppressing all dissidents, people like me. And we've seen not only politicians like me, but also even churches and preachers, civilians who are involved in the movements also have their bank account frozen. And I have to point out that with my credit card accounts, because I still have a debit balance, I still have money inside, and it's totally forfeited now. So it's in violation of property rights that's protected under our basic law, and I think that's very, very basic of what is required of banks that has an integrity. So now it's gone. So I believe that HSBC is a big sign that the business sector and the banking sectors would be self-censoring, would be used, at least those in Hong Kong, as a human rights, as means of human rights violations. So they will be involved. They are the stakeholders now.
You're now here in London, and you've been talking with British and other politicians and media. Are you satisfied with what both the UK and the international community has done in response to the situation in Hong Kong? And in your view, what more could they do?
Yes, I've been talking to them, parliamentarians and government officials, and as well as academics and NGOs. And I'm grateful and really thankful for the strong words and the stance that they made in the past, especially recently with the arrest of the 53, with the arrest of the 12 in Hong Kong. And they did spoke up very loudly for Hong Kong, and that's very encouraging. But of course, we expect a lot more can be done, and especially with sanctions. And U.S. done a lot, and also with the Human Rights Act passed. In the UK, I understand that the popular sentiments in Hong Kong is very much looking forward to sanctions from the UK's part. Either with personal sanctions on Beijing officials or government officials. And perhaps I'm also an advocate for inviting officials to also consider sanctions against HSBC people who made the decisions to freeze my accounts and the others' accounts. And so to widen up the scope of the sanctions, and these are what we are expecting. And then it's more imminent that we like also to see that different nations to provide lifeboat plans or safe haven plans for young protesters from Hong Kong, fleeing from Hong Kong, I mean, when they go into an exile, because it's problematic for many of the young ones. For example, going into the UK without a BNO visa or the eligibility. So they can't study here, they can't work here, they want to self-sustain themselves, but it's very difficult with the status. And they don't want to rely on social welfare of any countries. They want to be self-sustained, but without the proper status, they can't do that. So I'm also lobbying different countries to provide, if not pathway to citizenship, but at least longer term status, so for them to work and study elsewhere and to escape from the terror of this tyranny.
Absolutely. Do you, from what you see through talking to politicians and looking at the media, do you think the free world is starting to wake up to the dangers of the Chinese Communist Party?
I believe so. If compared to last year, early last year, when I traveled to Europe, I I can see that the European leaders now are taking a way stronger stance, and they are more ready to uh, to put up sanctions against Beijing and Hong Kong officials. And so it's encouraging in a way, but still not all encouraging, because just I think just 10 days ago I can still hear news from the EU that it's about to go into the CIA, the Comprehensive Agreement of Investments, with China. And with all the arrests in Hong Kong and all the dramatic uh, persecutions of dissidents in Hong Kong, it's really hard to convince the world that EU is taking a really strong stance against China, when on one hand it's considering sanctions SS against China, but on the other hand you're having a great deal amount of trade with China. So I'm also a strong advocate for EU countries to really reconsider and drop the signing of the deal with EU. So I think that's a very important step that the world leaders to show their determinations in the world, that it's really what is really standing for is freedom and democracy. It's not to compromise them with trade.
Um, the movement in Hong Kong is now off the streets. Protests can't take place. It's out of the legislature, as we've already discussed. The press and the judiciary and academia and even religion are threatened. Civil society is undermined. So where do you think the movement can go from here, both on the ground in Hong Kong, if it can go anywhere, and internationally, as more and more people go into exile? What do you think is the future for the diaspora outside Hong Kong?
It's a very difficult questions for all of us Hong Kongers to answer, even us who are outsiders and exiled, or those who are inside in Hong Kong are still struggling. I would say that the future prospect of the streets demonstrations will be very, very dim. And then the routes to public offices and elections that the democratic politicians can participate in will be very narrow. So with these as the circumstances, then I would say nurturing the civil society now is very, very important. And because we don't necessarily need any resources from being a legislator or being a district councillor. We can do it ourselves, and everyone can participate the efforts into the civil society, get people organized and mobilized privately, safely, be water. And so wait for the opportunity, the incidents happens, and then people can rise again. I'm still optimistic as the Hong Kong people, as long as they are determined, they are still fire in their hearts, still burning and flaming, and we will rise again. And for those who are outside, the difficulty now is that with the national security law, you saw the massive arrest of the 53. All their passports were forfeited, were seized by the regimes. So it's getting harder and harder for many activists and politicians to flee from Hong Kong as exiles. So it's counting more on us, those who are already outside, not to only do lobbying jobs with international communities, but also to mobilize and to organize those civil society, the Hong Kong civil societies overseas. And I believe that's also equally important, because there are expertise and connections and social capitals involved, and with great amount of people, for example, coming to London in cities like Toronto, Sydney, Melbourne, and with all these people and the expertise added together, it's a very strong civil society, and that can influence their own civil society and parliamentarians officials in their respective countries to get these people all on board and very much organized and form proper civil societies. I think that's the right move and the next move that we should be doing towards freedom and democracy in Hong Kong.
Absolutely. One final question. We're almost 2 weeks into a new year, 2021, after already a very challenging couple of years in 2019 and 2020 for Hong Kong, and indeed a challenging time for the world with the pandemic. What is your message to people who are watching this, whether they're in Hong Kong or in other parts of the world?
My message is for Hong Kongers is that don't give up. We never give up on Hong Kong. For people like me who are outside, and I want to express that, and I want to assure people in Hong Kong that we will be fighting continuously, and it's my lifelong missions to fight and to speak for Hong Kong. And I made it clear in my statement as I run into an exile that I'm very determined that I will go home. Hong Kong is our home. So we keep fighting. And for those who are in Hong Kong, stay calm and hold back and prepare fully themselves into waiting for the next waves of people's movements. And I believe it will come. I believe with international supports and us speaking outside, and with the Hong Kong people, well, with the people in Hong Kong, with determinations and fire still in the heart, we can make a change, and that tyrannies in the world won't last forever, but the will of Hong Kong and the will of all the people who support freedom in Hong Kong, it will. So sit tight, hang on, and never give up. That's the message.
Well, that's a very important and inspiring message to end on. And on behalf of Hong Kong Watch, I want to identify ourselves with that message as well. And I can promise viewers, I cannot promise viewers that 2021 will be a better year. I hope it will, but we need to be prepared for more challenges to come. But what I can promise viewers is that I personally and Hong Kong Watch as a team will keep fighting with you and for you. And just as Hong Kongers themselves who are outside Hong Kong, like you, Ted, have a belief that one day you'll go home. In a smaller way, it's not quite the same thing, but Hong Kong was once my home as well. And as you know, I was denied entry 3 years ago, and I can't go there. But I also have the hope that one day I also will go back to Hong Kong to visit, and that we'll meet there one day. We don't know when that will be or how long it will be, but we can hold on to that vision.
We will, of course, Ben. And it's also important that it's not only about freedom in Hong Kong, it's about freedom in the world, because having China as the superpower and extending the tyranny's arm to other countries. So it's also important for us to be allied with people in Uyghur and also Taiwanese, and perhaps also the Thai and the Belarusians, and it's very important that we fight together against all tyrannies in the world for freedom.
Absolutely, I 100% agree that this is not just about Hong Kong. This is about freedom itself. So, Ted Hui, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for your time. And this is a somber but also an inspiring way to begin the new year and to renew our fight for freedom. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Fan.